What's up, guys? It's Parallax Abstraction, and welcome to PXA Peeks at Fictorum. This is another title that's been on my backlog for a little while, and I wanted to show this off to you guys because it's a title that's got some very interesting ideas and puts a unique spin on a couple of genres that we've sort of seen well established in the last couple of years. This comes to us from a new developer called Scraping Bottom Games, who I discovered in a Reddit AMA, actually, and the main thing was that they were talking about how they'd played games their whole life, but when Unreal Engine went free in 2015, just decided, hey, maybe we should try making something. And this was the first thing they ever made, and they actually put it out commercially on Steam, and it's pretty impressive for something that came together that quick, though it's definitely got more than its fair share of, how do I put it, novice-related problems, I guess you could say. So this game is kind of like if you took something like FTL and that style of mechanic and married it with an arena-based combat title that is very heavily based around magic. And it's, like I said, it's got some really cool ideas to it. And yeah, I'm definitely been interested to show this off to you guys. So the way this works here is you start off with a character that you create from the beginning. This is a game that is made to be played in runs, and you have a little bit of customization. You can pick your name, or you can randomize it if you like. There's a whole bunch of aesthetic customization here that I'm not going to bother with. And then what you do is you pick your starting what's called title, which is like your magic affinity, if you will. So you unlock more titles by playing the hardcore mode, and we'll get into that later. And what you do is you can be, so to start with here, what I've got unlocked is I can be a fire-based mage, a lightning-based mage, a frost-based mage, or this is a sort of different variant of lightning, if you will. And you see here, there's quite a few more options that you can get when you start off here. So I'm going to focus on fire now, because that's kind of, I find, the easiest one to get yourself started off with here. All right, and off we go. So you're going to see very quickly how this is like FTL. So this game has a lot of text in it and a lot of exposition that happens in between each encounter that you go into, and there are a lot of choices that you can make as well that can affect how you will progress within the game. So the idea behind this game is that you are an outcast Fictorum, basically a mage who has been corrupted by something called the miasma, which is this basically evil force that is going over the world and magically corrupting things. You got away, but you're being pursued by what's called the Inquisition, which is the sort of major overarching body, I guess, that's trying to recapture you so they can destroy you. And as I understand it, your goal is to try to get to the end so that you can hopefully remove the miasma from the world while also avoiding the Inquisition at the same time. So that's sort of the pretext here. And you have this sort of overworld map that you have, and your goal is you have to get your way over here to get to what's called the Grand Nexus, which is what gets you into the next chapter of the game. And as you move along, you move forward to each of these this sort of takes place in this sort of mountainous, almost above the clouds magical world. It's kind of a neat concept for world building. And you have to move forward one at a time through all of these different things, but as you can see as I'm hovering over them there, they all spider out into different areas, and you can choose which direction that you want to go in. And you'll come across things as well. Any of these rocks that have this little sort of magical effect coming off of them are vendors. As you can see here, you do have a full inventory system in this. There is a bunch of loot that you can pick up that you can customize your character with. You can actually pick up additional spells here. So while I started as a fire-based mage, that is only my starting affinity. You can choose to use whatever magic that you want along the way. It's just really a question of what you choose to start with. And there's also spell customization here, which I'm going to get into later on. So you want to move through all of these different areas to get to the Grand Nexus. Now, you can choose to do this as quick as possible. You can make a beeline for it, or you can really take your time and take sort of a zigzaggy path and get to as much of these areas as possible, which allows you to do more quests and get more loot, but also for each time you move, the Inquisition gets closer to you, so you have to be careful about that. And also, you don't get your health back in between encounters, and health management is very much a thing in these games. So, all right, so let's go up this way here. Now, I'll show you what the vendors look like. So, obviously, this is just talking about, here's the vendor, so we don't really have anything here that we can buy or sell. So the currency of this game is what's called essence, which is this stuff down here. So you can choose to buy different gear for different amounts of essence. You can also choose to heal yourself if you want. You also have the ability to rest when you're at a site, which will give you a little bit of health back, but doesn't move you forward and gets the Inquisition closer to you. And you can buy additional spell customizations here. So what you can do with this that's really cool is when you're in one of the combat arenas, which I'll show you here, you can hold the right mouse button and customize the effect of your spell based on these 3 different sort of overarching traits that you have in this menu. And you can swap these out with different ones if you want. You can buy different ones and you can swap them out for different things. Some of them are general, some of them only affect certain magical affinities. So for example, these 2 at the bottom you can only use with fire-based magic. And it allows a certain amount of customization and ability to really tweak your play style to a way that you find most fitting, which I find quite interesting. So, all right, so let's move up here. And every time you move to one of these things, you'll be presented with something like this. So you can make, oftentimes you can make choices to either stay and fight or to move on. Sometimes nothing will actually happen at the area. Sometimes the choices will just be restricted to something here. But it mixes things up quite a bit, which I like. So, small town that seems to be under a permanent winter. Revan approach from a hidden path. Fictorum, I've discovered thy winter never. So you see, you can choose here. And I can send to Revan. I don't care if you're rambling. Just tell me what you need, and I will receive and what I will receive if I help. So you can choose to take on this little sort of freelance job here if you want, or you can just say, nope, I'm out of here. But let's do this so I can show it to you. I found an old tome that I will give to you if you destroy Richard Knapp's house. Yeah, all right, let's go. So, now I'll show you what this looks like. So when you go into one of the arenas, this is what you get. You come into one of these different environments. There are a few different ones, but they do repeat quite a bit, unfortunately. They are not randomly generated, which is kind of a bummer. And sometimes when you come in here, your goal is just to get to the Nexus, to get out. Sometimes you'll have to kill all the enemies in the area. Sometimes you'll have to kill a certain number of specific enemies. Or in this case, we have to destroy a dude's house. Now, destroy a house, you say? Oh, yes, indeed. So, okay, here comes the approaching army. So they're coming in on me here. So, you see, I have my magical affinity queued up, so I can just shoot a fireball at them. And I want to take these dudes out, right? Now, the other thing you can do is you also have this sort of blink spell that allows you to get out of crowd control. So you see here, I have this spell customization that comes up. Now, it's a little hard to demonstrate in the thick of combat, so I'll show you a little bit more about how it works once I clear out this here. So you're going to deal sometimes with just sort of meathead melee grunts, and you're also going to be combating other magic users, as you saw there. And the magic users will have some of them will have certain magical affinities and certain other abilities, and other things that you have to deal with. And also, because they are mages, they are often much tougher than you. See, that guy had shielding on him. But you're sort of seeing one of my core problems here right off the gate with this game, which is that the AI for the enemies in this game is just pretty stupid. The melee enemies just charge at you at a straight line. They pretty much only take the path of least resistance to try to get to you. And that's pretty much it. And the magic users will attempt to get as close enough to you as they can to use their spell and then just kite around. There's no real nuance or strategy to the AI or what they attempt to do. They just charge at you. And it gets really frustrating because as you get further in the game, the way it builds up the difficulty is just to send more guys at you. And that's really kind of it. It just becomes a numbers game, and it becomes a massive exercise in crowd control, which I don't find all that entertaining, to be honest with you. Now, you see, here's one of the cool things about the environments. You can duck into any house you want, and a lot of houses will have loot in them. So if you see a piece of furniture that has this little sort of particle effect on it, you can go up to it and press it, and you'll loot something. Some of the... Whoa! Hello! That was unanticipated. So, oh, good God. Okay, well, that kind of screwed me. And there you're going to see the other big problem with this game, which is how the physics work. So we got charged at by a bunch of guys who came into that house there, right? Yeah, so that is one of the big problems in this, that I'm actually going to do this again, and I'll show you right off the bat what happens here. So let's choose to do it again. Also, yeah, you may have seen that rewrite history button. Don't worry, I'm not skipping over that. We'll get into that. All right, so let's try this again. And I'm going to show you one of the other problems. One of the things about this game that makes it really cool, but is also one of its greatest problems, which is that every structure in the game is fully destructible. So you see, you know, a building that you don't like, you can just... Oh, there's guys right off the bat here. Hang on. So you see you have to wait to charge up here to be able to fire your spell. Now there is another interesting mechanic around that can sometimes be frustrating as well that I'll show you. So, alright, here we go. So we'll clear these guys out, right? So here's one of the cool things. You don't like that building? Okay, that didn't blow up very spectacularly, but... Huh. Hang on a minute. This building's actually remarkably durable. Well, this is making me look like an idiot. Thanks, game. So, one of the things you can do in this is every building is fully destructible. There we go. So it's starting to crumble apart there, right? And you may think that that's really cool, and indeed it is, and you can use it to your advantage in some situations because you can topple buildings down on top of enemies. Indeed, in some missions you have to do that. You'll have enemies that are actually hiding out in structures, and your main goal is to drop a building down on their head. The problem is that it's clear that Fictorum uses a very basic implementation of physics that doesn't really have a lot of nuance to it. So buildings blow up, and sometimes blow up in hilarious ways. Like, for example, let's do this tower up here. You also have crazy range, as you can see. So there we go. You see, this blew up kind of funny, right? It comes apart and pieces go flying in hilarious ways, and that is kind of neat and fun. But the big problem that you're going to have is that the physics are incredibly unpredictable. All they do is chunk up buildings in sort of a very basic fashion and send the pieces flying depending on where your explosive bits hit. Kind of like that. So you see how some pieces went flying that way? So the damage on building pieces is exceptionally high. So if a building collapses on a high-level enemy, it can take him out, which is nice. The problem is one piece of a house can also land on you and take you out. And it's not... I have multiple times died because of things like what happened when I came into this mission the first time. A bunch of enemies, you know, basically block the door and run into a house after me, and the only way for me to deal with them is to shoot at them, but then the house collapses, and then it falls on me, and I'm instantly dead. I've also had situations before where I've blown up a house, either intentionally or by accident, and a random piece of the roof went flying off at high velocity, came careening into my head, and I died suddenly. And I was like, well, what the frig is that about? So this is the house we have to destroy, as you can see by the arrow on it. Also, this game is sometimes not especially subtle about pointing out quest objectives to you. Okay, so that guy's house is done. As you can see, we've completed the quest there, and now we can move on. And the way you get out of all of these different areas is that you have to get into the Nexus. And the Nexus is where that glowing purple thing is over there. Now, what you have to do in most areas is the Nexus is normally blocked off by these sort of beams of light that are emitting from these towers. And what you have to do is destroy each of the towers that are emitting a beam of light in order to unlock the Nexus so you can get into it. So I blew up that one over there, so now we're going to do this one. See what I mean about the physics? Like, that's really cool. But if I was running forward and that just careened into me, I would die for reasons that were completely sort of unfair and out of my control. And that's really frustrating. Now, what's interesting as well is that you saw that I had a bunch of pursuers in this area. Now, you don't, in most cases, you don't have to actually clear out an area in order to be able to leave. You just have to unlock the Nexus and get out. The more enemies you kill, obviously, the greater chance you have of finding some loot. Plus, you can also go through all of these various structures and try to loot some stuff if you want as well. And in a lot of cases, even the quest objectives you don't have to necessarily complete. So I had a quest to destroy that guy's house. I could have still left the area if I hadn't completed that, but you will get penalized for it. Sometimes the Inquisition will make a big gain on you. Sometimes, you know, there'll be other things that happen that penalize you for not completing quests. So you certainly want to do that, but I like the fact that the game doesn't just go, nope, you just don't get to leave until you complete the quests. It's like you can choose to approach things however. Your character is very amoral in this, so you can choose to be a massive douchebag if you want. You can choose to be very, you know, you could choose to be a good Samaritan in many cases. You can choose to be very, or you can just choose to be pragmatic and be very practical about how you go about things. Okay, so here's a lightning tome that I can equip. So you see we got some stuff here. Unfortunately, the loot is not really all that variable. Most of the items look fairly similar to each other, and they're mostly variations on a theme, really. It's just kind of the same items with more statistics to them. But that's cool as well, right? In that you are able to level up your stats as you go, which is kind of nice. So, all right, and you see that yellow band there is the Inquisition gaining on me here. So here's another vendor. So we're just gonna sell out some stuff here. And we'll get ourselves some essence back. Now, I actually don't need to heal. Well, 2, which is nice. I don't actually need to heal here. But you can do that if you so choose. So you have these 3 bars down here, which are your health, your mana, and your stamina, as you probably noticed by watching me play there. So we're going to move on to another one here. Okay, found himself on a bridge crossing the Snake's Head ravine at dusk, staring down, hoping in vain to see a river that bears the same name. Unfortunately, a deep sense of miasma, he looked up, scowled across the bridge, continued the path. So, okay, so I can either choose to stay in an inn if I want, or I can move and spend 10 essence, or I can move on. I don't need to spend any essence because I'm actually fully healed. So, and you can also click the rest button here if you want, as I said, which will give you a little bit of additional health, but the Inquisition moves forward, and as you see here, they're taking over these different structures, and it shows you where they're about to take over. You don't want to be in their path when they show up, that's for sure. So you see here, there's literally nothing that happened here, or not much really. So this is a little outpost. Sometimes it will just move on and say, yep, there's nothing here. Or sometimes you can go in and loot if you like. Now, what I'm going to show you here as well is this spell crafting thing. So when you're charging up a shot like this, so you see how the mana is constantly ticking down? So this is another thing that you have to manage a lot when you're managing crowds, because if you let your mana run out while you're casting and doing an aim, this happens. It will start to sap away your life. So you have to be very careful to not overuse your mana, and that while you want to plan your shots, you also need to take them fairly quickly sometimes, because if you don't, you'll start burning away at your own health. In addition to that, if you hold down the right mouse button, this is where you have the spell crafting ability. So you see there that I have 3 different options, which are high velocity, multi-shot, and high explosive. And what you can do is the game goes into a slow-mo bullet time effect when you pull that up. And what you can do is by dragging the mouse button in one of the 3 different directions, you can choose to assign a certain amount of each of those attributes for your next shot. Now, as you see, when you pull it up, your mana is decreasing super, super fast. So you gotta choose quick. And you're also trying to aim while you're picking these attributes, right? But as you can see, I have high velocity, I have multi-shot, and I have high explosive. So I can choose to make the shots more powerful, I can make them go faster, or I can split them up, I can kind of merge them out into that kind of thing. And that becomes very valuable, again, for crowd control, because it's something that's going to be... Learning how to manipulate this is very key. And I think that is this game's greatest strength, because as you saw earlier on, you can choose to swap out these 3 different attributes for ones that are certain spell specific or more generalist. And you can use them in different combinations to give your spells very different effects, which can really vary it up on every playthrough. So for example here, let's multi-shot and high velocity that. So you see, I managed to throw that really quick and take it out. And as you can hear by the change in music, the enemies have been activated and they're coming at me now. The soundtrack is also a pretty big weakness in this game. The music in this all sounds very generic and very bland. I frankly don't find it all that interesting. I believe there is a soundtrack for this that you can buy if you so desire, but I have personally not found it all that engaging. I would probably, if I was playing this, I would probably play it with something on my second monitor and just not have the music enabled at all. So yeah, and you can see here the customization options that we have in terms of dealing with the spells, and this will become key later on for sure. But as I said, the thing that... So I've gotten to, on my main playthrough, I've gotten to Chapter 4. And the thing that really bugs me about this is, as I said, the only way this game gets harder later on is by just throwing more enemies at you. It just becomes a meat grinder. And because the enemies are kind of stupid, you're just going to have like 3 times as many guys charging at you in a straight line as you did before. And it just gets frustrating because of the amount of crowd control that you have to do, and that's really what it becomes an exercise in. It's not, there's no real strategy to it. You can't sneak up on guys. Enemies will see you from a million miles off, and you can't really, there are the occasional rare opportunity where you can sneak by them, but even that's fairly irregular. And it just kind of feels like you're running the same meat grinder over and over again with slightly different attributes. But no matter what kind of spell you're using, whether it's fire or lightning or whatever, you're just doing the same thing. It's spam at the guys as quickly as possible so that you can get them out of your way and move on. And you're also going to be doing it through generally the same set of environments. You know, there are a number of environments in here, but as I said before, they are not procedurally generated. They are so you will see repetition a lot, and that's kind of a bummer because everything gets very familiar and very samey after a while. The game also, it looks okay, but it doesn't look great. I personally, in particular, think the UI treatment in this is pretty weak. I don't think this UI looks very good at all, though. I mean, you know, you're not spending that much time in menus, so it's not a big deal. But the assets in this look okay, but not great, and yet this game is incredibly demanding. I'm running a GTX 1080. You're probably seeing some stuttering happen there. That does happen fairly frequently. And also, yeah, I am running a GTX 1080, and according to the LED on the card, which indicates how hard it's working incredibly hard right now. The card's actually running pretty warm. And, well, let me put it this way. I just beat the 2017 version of Prey, which looks far better than this, and stressed my GPU only about half as much as this game does. So maybe not necessarily the best optimized. This does run on Unreal Engine 4, but so it doesn't have the typical Unity optimization problems, but it definitely has, if you were to play this on an older computer, I'm not sure what your experience would be like. So you'll have to take that with a grain of salt there for sure. And that's the thing where I get conflicted about Fictorum, because this is a game that has some very ambitious ideas, and frankly is doing things that no other game has really done. I've never seen a game take the concept of FTL and also add in this arena combat and also make it primarily about magic. Oh, so I have to kill a bunch of guys here and save townsfolk. Oh, that's interesting. You see, this one I've actually not seen before as a quest objective. But you see, now we're fighting the corrupted. So the corrupted these are the creatures that are caused by the miasma, and they are basically a similar idea as the soldiers, except they have variants in abilities. So these guys can, there are enemies in here that explode, as you saw with one of them there. There are some that can turn invisible. And, but you see they're doing the same thing. They just charge at you in a straight line, and you're just managing crowds and sort of kiting around and trying to stay ahead of the biggest wave of them so that you can take them out. As you can see, they're also quite a bit tougher as well. So I also have lightning here, which I forgot. So this is lightning stream, which rather than casting individual bolts of lightning allows you to sort of do the Emperor Palpatine thing and sort of constantly be streaming out lightning, which is kind of interesting. But again, it doesn't really necessarily change what you have to do, just does it in a slightly different way. And that's where I'm really conflicted about this. I really like the ideas in Fictorum. I think they have some really cool stuff, but I also think this is a novice developer who, I mean, hey, making your first game and putting it out commercially is impressive. You know, most novice developers out there generally end up, you know, doing a lot of smaller, doing a lot of small projects or prototypes or things like that before they put a game out. These guys basically took their first project and put it out commercially, which is impressive. And they've managed to do a lot of pretty impressive things with that. But at the same time, in many ways, this does feel like an amateur production. What seems to be relatively poor optimization, oh, I wrecked that guy with physics. Yeah, son. Oh, you done. Yeah, the relatively poor optimization, the sort of mediocre production values, especially on the UI side, the basic physics implementation that more often than not results in you dying unfairly. So one thing I pointed out that I would talk about earlier in the video is how there's that rewrite history button. So if you're not playing in hardcore mode and you die, you are allowed to literally hit a button and go back to the last place that you stopped at, like the last island that you were on. You can choose to replay the level that killed you. You can choose to go another way if you so desire. You can choose to do... you can basically just literally rewrite history and start over again. If you're playing on the hardcore mode, then there is actual roguelite style permadeath, and you... Oh, hey, brah. How's it going, brah? There is roguelite style permadeath, but if you want to unlock more starting titles, i.e. more starting magical affinities, you have to actually play in hardcore mode. The normal mode doesn't allow you to unlock any more starting stuff. And you see I kind of got screwed there. And it's almost like these guys knew that the way this game is designed often results in you getting killed unfairly, and was like, well, we need to put in a button for that. And that really frustrates me. So you see I didn't complete my quest there. So I got a bunch of loot, but I also didn't complete that quest, and that's going to affect me later on. So, but yeah, when they created the rewrite history button, I was like, huh, it's almost like these guys knew that the game had major problems with you dying unfairly like that, and you would need a rewind button sometimes. And that's not cool, because that, to me, shows that there are legitimate problems with the game that they didn't have the means to deal with and just went, well, we'll just put in this easy way out. But then they tied permanent progression in the game to having to accept the fact that you're going to die unfairly sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, I don't... That's frustrating to me. Because that shows to me that the scope of this project and their ambitions got ahead of their ability to develop around them. And that's kind of a bummer. Whoop. Oh, jeez. So, yeah, I mean, I hope this game does... I honestly hope this game does well enough that they're able to make a sequel, because there are really cool ideas in here. Really cool ideas. And if they had the ability to flesh them out a little bit more, once they've got some more experience and had some more practice, then I think they can have something really special here. As of right now, the only way I can recommend this game is that if you've seen all its limitations and you're willing to work with those and willing to deal with the fact that the game will sometimes kill you in ways that are straight up not fair. Not fair in the FTL random number generation kind of way, but not fair as in the sometimes you'll die because the game engine literally fought you. So you see I died here, and if you want, I can just hit the rewrite history button, and back we go, and I can choose to move on from there if I want. So you see, in this case, I think what I would probably do before doing this chapter is rest a bunch so that I can heal up. So now, and then now we can go in and try it again. All right. So yeah, that's the main thing, is that I really like the ideas that are in this, but there are so many times where I have just become intensely frustrated because the game did something that was essentially beyond my control, but held me accountable for it, and that's just unfair. And I really don't like, as cool as the ambitions were, and as I'm sure these developers thought they could make it work, it does frustrate me. Then rather than scale down their scope to accommodate their ability, they kept the scope of the game the way it was and just kind of put in ways to sort of cheat around it and sort of remove the inherent tension that comes from roguelites by going, well, if the game screws you, you can just hit a button to undo that change, because we know that you know, sometimes it's going to screw you. I have a real problem with that. And like I said, this is a game that has cool ideas, but it was very clearly also a rookie effort. You know, it was done by a team who I think probably bit off more than they could chew for their first project, and then probably sort of scoped down a little bit and then scaled up to something like this. But at the same time, I hope this does well enough that they have an opportunity to do that at some point, because I think if you could put some more spit and polish on this, figure out the AI, figure out the physics, figure out the graphical treatment, and get some of those core faults resolved, they could have something really impressive on their hands here. Basically an FTL, but evolved to a new level, which I would really like to see. As of right now, I can say that I've enjoyed this for what it is, but I don't think I'm going to play any more of it because it just frustrates me too much. But a lot of people out there have much more tolerance for frustration and situations like this than I do. And if you do, then you're probably going to find some cool stuff to be done here, because in this game, you have to spin a lot of plates, but it's very satisfying when everything clicks and it all comes together and you're able to really pull off something impressive. And you see here, when you move on to another chapter, you get to pick an upgrade, which doesn't really do enough to accommodate for the massive increase in enemy volumes that you'll end up dealing with. But yeah. So yeah, that is Fictorum, developed and published by Scraping Bottom Games in 2017. It is on the PC, it is on Steam, it is on GOG for, I believe it's around, I think it's $20 normally. So yeah, it's got a lot of caveats, and it's got a really good idea, but a lot of frustration in it. And so take that for what it's worth, but if you can tolerate it, there's something here you won't find anywhere else. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you liked what you saw here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. That does help me out a great deal. If you want to watch something else, check out the videos on screen now, and don't forget to follow @PXA Media on Twitter to find out about new stuff first.